Moving on. As workers face a cost of living crisis, bosses are raking it in. Last week, several companies announced record profits. Centrica, which owns British Gas, made £1.3 billion in the first half of this year. That's 5 times greater than the same period last year. And oil giant Shell made almost £10 billion in the past 3 months alone. These profits are directly attributable to rising fuel prices, but it's not just energy firms that are raking it in. BT boss Philip Jansen raked in £3.5 million last year, an increase of 32% on the year before. And this provides the context in which 40,000 workers from the BT group have gone on strike. Today is the second of a 2-day strike, the first being last Friday. It comes after workers rejected a blanket £1,500 pay uplift, which works out as about an average of 5%, or, of course, well below inflation. These are the first national telecom strikes since 1987, and the below inflation pay rise comes as the company recorded profits of £1.3 billion and paid out £700 million in profits to shareholders. To discuss the strikes, I'm joined by Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Michael.
You heard there, I gave a brief introduction to the context of the strike. What else should our viewers be aware about here? What's the really significant context that people should get a grasp of?
Well, I think the context is a whole range of numbers that demonstrate that they can afford to pay workers a substantial pay rise. So those numbers, I'll add some. So you had the 32% increase of the CEO's own wages at a time when he was imposing a pay deal, which on average was worth 4.8% to our members. But that is also against the background that our members never got a pay rise last year. They got a one-off lump sum that wasn't consolidated in their pay. The actual money that went to shareholders was £758 million, and that represented 58% of the overall profits went to shareholders. By comparison, the value of the offer to our members was about 5% of those profits. I mean, this is just staggering stuff. And the other thing you should be aware of is not only, ripping off the workforce, they're ripping off customers as well. So at the start of the year, they put up prices by 9% when inflation was running at about 5%. And they announced on the eve of the first strike that they're going to put prices up again for customers by 13% next January. So that will be a 22% increase in prices. I mean, this is just unbelievable that companies can get away with that type of behaviour. And I have to say, they have lost the respect of the entire workforce for their actions. And so, we're out there today, we're saying that our members are disgusted with the behaviour of the company. These were key workers, Michael, who, there wouldn't have been a home workers revolution without the type of work that our members do, because they do run and maintain the whole of the UK's broadband infrastructure, the telecommunication structure. And, this is how they're treated. And as you said in your opening introduction, the first time in over 35 years that these members have voted on strike. Another thing that's worth noting is that this is a group of workers who, don't work in big depots. A lot of them work on their own day in, day out, and a lot of them are home workers. So, all credit to them in voting yes when, they the company. So we're in a situation where, we have to now continue this dispute. We're not going to let this guy, Philip Jansen, get off the hook here. I think he thinks that he can get away with this. He's missing in action. That's another thing you should be aware of. He's refusing to negotiate. So we're in a pretty unique position there where the company are not even in the current wave of disputes. At least there's some negotiations going on. This guy is point blank refusing to negotiate. He never faces the media. They just read out bland statements, most of which is completely untrue. So, it's a big issue for us and we're not letting it go. We're going to come back out. There'll be more strike action, but we do want to consult with our members. We're mindful of the current cost of living crisis, and we're going to come up with some other tactics that pile the pressure on the CEO and the board.
What's the union position on a flat pay rise? Now, I know, £1,500 is not good enough. I don't think for any worker that's going to be, above inflation. So for everyone, it's a real terms pay cut. But you could argue that in principle, a flat pay rise is quite progressive because it means that proportionately, lower paid workers get more than higher paid workers than if it were just say, blanket 5% or 9% or whatever for everyone. How do you approach that in terms of a flat pay rise or a percentage pay rise?
Well, I think you have to look at it on its merits. Your first job of any union is to increase the size of the pot that's available. The pot isn't big enough. So we can't really look at it at this point in time until we increase the size of the available pot. I think we would be mindful of the reality of what it means for lower paid workers. So there are some merits in looking at flat pay increases. But I think you've also got to think about maintaining the differentials that might link to the various skills that people have to get to qualify for those grades. So there's a whole range of things. But let me be absolutely clear. I don't think that comes into it when the guys imposed this deal, not negotiated it. And I would say as well, the lowest paid workers, which happen to be call centre workers, who are on, up to about £20,000, £21,000, they haven't even got the good end of this by having a flat pay rise, because actually the reason that they put £1,500 on the table for those workers was they'd fallen behind their own real living wage employer brand, which they have to get to a certain level. That had gone down. So about £1,000 of that was actually paid back in January just to get them back to the level of a real living wage employer. So those workers, the lowest paid under this deal, actually only got about 2.6% imposed. So I think you've got to take it in the round, but let's focus initially on getting them around the table and at the same time increasing the size of the pot of money that's available.
It's interesting. I hadn't realised that about the call centre staff. So this is actually just the minimum they could have offered to keep that status.